The successful invasion of Fortress Europe required not only overwhelming force, but also an act of strategic magic, a fundamental manipulation of reality designed to blind the enemy to the single, most critical factor of the entire operation, where and when the main blow would fall. This imperative for deception arose directly from the overwhelming strategic challenge facing the Western Allies in late 1943 and early 1944. The challenge was stark and simple. The Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, was the most logical, most direct, and logistically sound location for an invasion. It offered the shortest air support route, the quickest path to Germany, and the most favorable geography for a massive troop landing. Because of this unassailable logic, the German defense forces, acting on the directives of their senior command, had concentrated their strongest, most battle-ready divisions, including the bulk of their irreplaceable panzer reserves, specifically in that region. The defenses there were formidable, deep, and constantly reinforced. To attack the Pas de Calais directly would have been to accept a catastrophic level of casualties and risked the entire operation being decisively crushed on the beaches. Therefore, the planning for Operation Overlord quickly recognized that the invasion of Normandy, a less defensible, more geographically challenging location for the invaders, requiring a much longer sea voyage, could only succeed if the German command was utterly convinced that the primary assault was destined for the Pas de Calais. The strategic goal was not merely to confuse the defenders. It was to freeze their powerful reserve formations, preventing them from being committed to the actual Normandy battle until it was too late to save the German position. The fate of the entire war hinged on whether the Allied forces, once landed on the 5 beaches of Normandy, could maintain their foothold and rapidly build up their strength before the panzer reserves could arrive and annihilate them. If those powerful reserve units, held centrally by the enemy's high authority, were committed to the Normandy fight within the critical first 72 hours, the invasion would likely fail. The only way to prevent this was through a massive, coordinated program of strategic military deceit, creating an illusion so compelling, so logically sound, and so personally convincing that the enemy would sacrifice the reality of the moment for the lie they had been conditioned to believe. This necessity gave rise to the ambitious, intricate, and ultimately decisive campaign known as Operation Fortitude. Every resource, from inflatable rubber tanks to the most complex radio networks, was now dedicated to one overwhelming task, proving that a massive, non-existent army was poised to strike the enemy at the place the enemy already expected them to be.
The cornerstone of the entire deception campaign lay in the meticulous and massive fabrication of the primary threat, Operation Fortitude South. This complex, orchestrated falsehood was designed to convince the German High Command that the largest, most formidable invasion force ever assembled, designated the 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, was currently positioned directly opposite the Pas de Calais, poised for a final, catastrophic assault that would make the Normandy landings seem like mere reconnaissance. The success of this deception hinged on one fundamental principle of espionage. The Germans could not be told the lie. They had to be fed the evidence so convincingly that they would arrive at the false conclusion themselves. The illusion of FUSAG, hardware and logistics. The first layer of the deception involved the creation of a physical army where none existed. Along the coast of southeast and eastern England, observers for the German Abwehr intelligence service were encouraged to see what they expected to see: massive troop movements and the gathering of amphibious assets. This was achieved through inflatable armor, the rubber army. To simulate the enormous tank and armored division buildup necessary for a major invasion, the Allies deployed hundreds of dummy tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces made of canvas stretched over wooden frames, or, more effectively, inflatable rubber. These pneumatic tanks were cheap, easily moved, and, when viewed from high-altitude German reconnaissance aircraft, cast realistic shadows, and possessed the bulk required to deceive the cameras. Entire fields were filled with these phantom formations, constantly shuffled to suggest readiness and movement. Dummy ports and airfields. Fake logistics infrastructure was constructed. The number of non-existent landing craft, LVTs, and troop transports necessary for a Calais landing was simulated by building wooden and canvas mock-ups in harbors, always strategically placed so that German reconnaissance flights could photograph them. Furthermore, dummy airfields were built, complete with wooden and inflatable aircraft, to suggest a massive air umbrella that would cover the real attack on Calais. The oil and supply deception. To convince the Germans that FUSAG was truly ready for action, vast, conspicuous piles of dummy oil barrels and supply crates were constructed near the troop concentration areas. This simulated the fuel and ammunition necessary to sustain a breakthrough from the Pas de Calais toward the German border, reinforcing the image of an imminent massive invasion, not merely a raid. The art of radio silence and the traffic of lies. The most crucial and technically complex layer of the deception was the wireless traffic. Modern military operations are betrayed by the volume and pattern of their radio communications. The actual troop units preparing for Normandy, Overlord, maintained strict radio silence. Conversely, FUSAG had to sound like the largest, most active army in the world. Wireless operational detachments. Specialized Royal Corps of Signals units, sometimes known as the sonic deceptors, meticulously generated thousands of fake radio messages daily. These operators mastered the unique fist, or the personal touch or rhythm, of individual radio operators from the fictitious FUSAG headquarters and its fictitious divisions. This was vital, as German listeners could identify a unit's authenticity by its transmission style. Simulated headquarters. The radio traffic included messages coordinating non-existent supply movements, reporting on fictitious divisional readiness, and running drills for the Calais assault. The sheer volume of this chatter, sounding exactly like the complex, bustling command structure of a million-man army, confirmed to German listening posts that the true headquarters of the invasion lay in the southeast of England. The personalization of the threat. Finally, the deception needed a face, one that the Germans respected and feared above all others. A crucial element of Fortitude South was the appointment of an American general known to be highly aggressive and successful as the commander of FUSAG. His presence, constantly highlighted through leaked information and conspicuous staged visits, served as the ultimate psychological confirmation to the German high command that this was the main show. The Germans fully expected an aggressive, no-holds-barred assault from this commander, and positioning him opposite Calais cemented the German belief that the main invasion would hit their strongest defenses. This personalization made the Phantom Army feel terrifyingly real. By June 5, 1944, the illusion was complete. German intelligence had successfully been persuaded by the cumulative evidence of fake logistics, massive false radio chatter, and a fearsome commander. The German command's intelligence assessments concluded with absolute certainty that the Normandy landings were nothing more than a diversionary raid, and that the real, massive invasion by FUSAG was still slated to strike the Pas de Calais. The strategic reserves remained frozen, waiting for the Ghost Army to attack.
The purpose of Fortitude North was one of pure strategic paralysis. By 1944, the Germans maintained a massive, disproportionate military presence in Norway, comprising over 300,000 highly trained troops, numerous crack mountain and infantry divisions, and substantial naval and air assets. The German command, particularly Hitler, maintained an irrational fixation on Norway, viewing it as a vital strategic shield against an attack on the Reich and a crucial base for naval operations. The Allied objective was simple: reinforce this German paranoia to ensure that these valuable, irreplaceable troops remain frozen in place, utterly unable to be transferred south to reinforce the actual battle taking place in France. The fabrication of the Scottish Army. The Allies created the fictitious 4th British Army, sometimes referenced as the 2nd Canadian Division, supposedly based in Scotland and poised to launch an imminent invasion of Norway. This illusion had to be highly convincing to German intelligence, particularly the Abwehr agents operating in Scandinavia and the neutral nations. Uniforms and markings. The deception teams went to great lengths to create an authentic atmosphere. Fictional divisional and corps headquarters were established in Scotland. Dummy signs pointing to non-existent camps, supply depots, and training areas were erected, prominently displaying unit names and insignia that would be familiar to German intelligence services. Soldiers from existing units were instructed to wear fake Norwegian shoulder patches and Arctic gear while moving conspicuously through Scottish towns, suggesting specialist training for a landing in the Norwegian fjords. Increased naval activity. To sell the threat, Allied navies staged highly visible, though confusing movements in the North Sea. Small convoys were seen leaving Scottish ports, suggesting the gathering of invasion fleets. Submarine patrols were increased, and reconnaissance flights were deliberately made to appear to be scouting landing beaches and defenses along the Norwegian coast. Psychological warfare and intelligence leaks. Fake operational plans, sometimes deliberately lost or stolen, containing explicit details of the Norwegian invasion, were planted where they could be easily intercepted by double agents or captured by German security forces. These documents provided granular detail on landing zones like Stavanger or Bergen and target objectives, lending a high degree of credibility to the threat. The wireless whispers of the North. As with Fortitude South, the technical component was paramount. Specialist radio units were tasked with simulating the enormous volume of communication necessary for a combined British and Norwegian force preparing a major invasion. High-volume chatter. The airwaves between Scotland and the North Sea were saturated with coded messages, logistical requests, weather updates, and training reports, all pertaining to the fictitious invasion force. The traffic was designed to mimic the build-up phase, sounding increasingly urgent as June 6th approached. Maintaining the lie. Crucially, unlike the Normandy radio traffic, which ceased on D-Day, the Fortitude North radio activity continued unabated even after the Normandy landings began. This continuous signal was the ultimate proof to German monitoring stations that the Norwegian army was still in place, waiting for its cue. German intelligence, clinging to the principle of not thinning the Norwegian garrison, interpreted this sustained radio silence from the real invaders and the continued chatter from the fake ones as absolute confirmation that the true invasion was still pending in the north. The paralyzing effect of Fortitude North was total. Despite the clear crisis unfolding in France, not a single division from Norway was released to reinforce the struggling German armies in Normandy for the crucial initial weeks. These hundreds of thousands of crack troops, essential for any successful German counteroffensive, remained uselessly stationed in the fjords and mountains, defending against a phantom army that existed only as static and radio waves. This was a monumental victory of psychological warfare, ensuring the Allied beachhead could expand without facing the overwhelming concentration of German reserves.
The stage was set by the Allies, the lie was perfectly rehearsed, and the decisive moment arrived on June 6, 1944. Details the dramatic sequence of events where the years of meticulous deception paid off, resulting in the paralysis of the German response and the survival of the Allied beachhead. The fate of the entire invasion hinged not on the actions of the Allied soldiers fighting on the beaches, but on the actions of the German High Command miles away, analyzing the flood of confusing and contradictory intelligence. The initial paralysis and the diversionary mindset. When the massive Allied invasion fleet struck the 5 beaches of Normandy in the pre-dawn hours of D-Day, the immediate German reaction was one of confusion exacerbated by their existing beliefs. German military intelligence, Abwehr, had been so thoroughly saturated with the lies of Operation Fortitude that the initial landings were instantly filtered through the lens of deception. The key decision-makers, most crucially Adolf Hitler and the staff of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht,
OKW, clung to the belief they had been so expertly fed that the Normandy landings were nothing more than a diversionary raid designed to draw German reserves away from the Pas de Calais, where the true, decisive, massive invasion by FUSAG was still pending. This belief was reinforced by several factors managed by Allied deception. The FUSAG radio silence. The actual radio traffic from the Normandy invasion forces went quiet immediately before the assault, while the massive volume of fake, highly active radio traffic from the phantom FUSAG army opposite Calais continued unabated. This audible evidence convinced German listening posts that the huge army near Calais was simply waiting for the perfect window to strike. The patent factor. The knowledge that the feared, aggressive American general was in command of the non-existent FUSAG cemented the belief that the main effort would be launched from the sector under his command, which was not Normandy. Hitler's fatal decision. Freezing the reserves. The success of Operation Fortitude culminated in one single catastrophic command decision by Hitler, directly overruling his field commanders. Even as the situation in Normandy rapidly deteriorated, with Allied forces gaining ground and consolidating their positions, Hitler maintained his conviction. Field Marshals von Rundstedt and Rommel, while fighting the actual battle, urgently pleaded for the release of the vital, centrally controlled panzer reserves, particularly the 1st SS Panzer Corps and the Panzer Lehr Division, which were still positioned near Calais. Hitler, relying on his manipulated intelligence assessments and his belief in his own strategic intuition, denied their requests. He decreed that the Normandy invasion was a feint, and the reserves must remain fixed in place, ready to crush the real, larger invasion at the Pas de Calais, which he expected to arrive within days or weeks. This decision was the ultimate victory of the lie. The most powerful, mobile units the German army possessed were held frozen and useless for days, then weeks, waiting for a phantom army to materialize. This crucial window, the first 7 to 10 days after D-Day, was all the time the Allies needed. The weeks of paralysis. The deception did not end on D-Day. It had to be maintained. Fortitude South successfully convinced the Germans to keep the 15th Army, a powerful, uncommitted German force, pinned in the Calais area until late July, long after the Allies had established an unshakable foothold and begun their breakout operations. Similarly, Fortitude North ensured that the 300,000 crack troops in Scandinavia remained there for the entirety of the campaign. The time bought by the Ghost Army was invaluable. It allowed the Allies to absorb the initial counterattacks, bring ashore overwhelming amounts of men and materiel, and systematically defeat the German forces in Normandy piece by piece. The lie paralyzed the German response, fractured their command, and secured the success of the most ambitious military invasion in history, proving that the most effective weapon in the arsenal was not a tank or a plane, but deception itself. The final act of the Fortitude deception campaign is not marked by a single battle or explosion, but by the quiet, absolute triumph of the lie over the military truth. The ultimate victory of the lie details the devastating strategic consequences of the German command's paralysis, proving that the deception was arguably the most critical component of the entire Normandy invasion. The sustained paralysis and the end of hope. The success of Operation Fortitude was measured not only by the German confusion on D-Day itself, but by the fact that the lie was maintained and believed for weeks afterward. The Phantom Army, FUSAG, remained a fully credible threat to the German High Command until late July 1944. Immobilizing the 15th Army was the most critical strategic win. The complete neutralization of the German 15th Army, positioned in the Pas de Calais region. This army, consisting of over 20 battle-ready divisions, was superior in strength and condition to the German 7th Army fighting in Normandy. Because Hitler and the OKW remained convinced that the real massive invasion was still coming via FUSAG, they held the 15th Army rigidly in place, waiting for the non-existent second wave. For nearly 2 months, the 15th Army served no purpose other than defending against rubber tanks and radio static. Strategic isolation. The deception campaign successfully isolated the actual Normandy battleground. Not only were the troops in Calais pinned, but Fortitude North kept the 300,000 crack troops in Scandinavia completely out of the fight. This meant that the German forces fighting for their lives in the Norman bocage received only slow, piecemeal reinforcements, insufficient to stop the expanding Allied beachhead. Every day the 15th Army remained idle. The Allies poured in hundreds of thousands of men and millions of tons of supplies via the Mulberry harbors and the newly captured ports. The inevitable collapse. The time bought by the Ghost Army was decisive. The critical logistical window, the weeks necessary for the Allies to establish air superiority, build their supply dumps, and prepare for a breakout, was secured by Fortitude. When the Allies finally launched Operation Cobra in late July 1944, smashing through the exhausted German lines at Saint-Lô, the German High Command had no effective strategic reserve left to commit. The forces that should have been available to stabilize the front, the 20 divisions of the 15th Army, were still guarding the coast opposite FUSAG. By the time the German command finally realized the deception, it was too late. The front was collapsing. The Americans were sweeping around the German flank, and the great encirclement in the Falaise pocket was imminent. The psychological blow was as great as the physical one, the betrayal by their own intelligence sources, and the realization that they had been comprehensively fooled by a phantom army created a final, devastating crisis of command and morale. The legacy of the lie. Operation Fortitude stands as one of the most remarkable intelligence triumphs in military history. It ensured the survival of the D-Day landings and fundamentally shaped the Battle of Normandy. The deception allowed the Allies to fight a strategically simplified battle, fighting only the German forces already present, rather than facing the full, concentrated force of the German army in the West. The lie did not merely win a battle, it won the campaign. It proved that in modern warfare, the most effective force multiplier is not technology, but the power to manipulate the enemy's mind, freezing an entire army in place with nothing more than carefully crafted communication and the psychological brilliance of exploiting the enemy's fixed logical expectations. The war was accelerated, and countless lives were saved by the unparalleled success of the Ghost Army.